Hello, I'm Rachel Richards, former BBC correspondent, parenting coach and mother of 2 teenagers and 2 older stepdaughters.
Hi, I'm Susie Asley, mindfulness instructor, mum of 3 teenagers, 2 of them being twins.
Welcome. Pull up a chair. We'll be talking backchat later. So before I get rudely interrupted, let's begin. Bullying is an issue that's fraught for any parent. Its prevention is a growing research field. So what is the definition of bullying? In the research paper, Bullying Behaviours in Children and Adolescents, it's defined as negative physical, verbal or relational actions that A, have hostile intent, B, cause distress to the victim. You can't see it, but Susie's really concentrating. C, are repeated, and D, involve a power imbalance between perpetrators and victims. Definitive figures about the extent of bullying are actually hard to come by. I've seen quite a few sort of academic research articles. One, which is a little bit old now, it's 2014 study. The percentage of children who reported involvement in bullying was 13% in the USA, 24% in England, and 8% in Germany. And recent international studies indicated that bullying prevalence varied from 32% among Lithuanian 11-year-old boys to 2% among Armenian girls of all ages.
That's a huge difference, but it kind of also depends on how they measure that, surely.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which questions they use and that.
Yeah, different countries, different
Tricky.
questions,
Yeah.
different kids. Yeah.
Hard to know.
Hard to know. Hard to put a finger on it, but we know it happens and we want to stop it.
Yeah.
Or we want to at least try and manage it.
Yeah.
So what have the experts learned about bullying? Right, I've got a little list here. There is not a single profile of a young person involved in bullying. Youth who bully can either be well-connected socially or marginalized and may be bullied by others as well. So similarly, those who are bullied sometimes are bullies.
Yeah, those are kind of external criteria, aren't they? I mean, I'm sure if you were to look at internal, emotional criteria, there would be some similarities there.
And solutions to bullying, again, are not simple. They say that really the best approaches show that you have to confront the problem from all the different angles. It's not, you can't simply say, here, I'm going to do this and that will fix it, because there are so many different things that make up a bullying situation and it is situational.
Yeah, absolutely. I always often find that with bullying, it seems to be kind of swing from one extreme to the other, that it's either, everything is bullying and we have to stamp it out and do whatever it takes. Or it's kind of like, oh, is it really bullying? Isn't it just a bit of banter, a bit of teasing?
Yes.
And it kind of swings backwards and forwards a bit.
And every bit of research I've done says that zero tolerance policy to bullying doesn't work.
No, I can imagine.
And that's because you don't really get under what's going on and you don't have proper discussions and solve the things that are causing these problems.
Yeah, it's a bit like doing family therapy with just one member of the family, isn't it? It doesn't really work.
So what parents can do, parents create trust with their children by initiating open, honest discussion. So what the experts say is, look, why don't you try and sort of preempt bullying scenarios? Before it even happens, we can have discussions with our teens and our young children about what is bullying and why it matters. And these are all the things we've had talks about this in the past. Talk in the car where they're trapped.
Yeah.
Before or after homework, just any kind of openings where you can talk about just the way that people relate to each other.
Yes.
And whether I like to find stories in all sorts of newspapers, on Facebook, any social media, where you've seen something that looks a bit like bullying or somebody complaining that they've been treated a certain way. And I love to show them to my teenagers and say, hey, what do you think?
That's a really good idea. And then you have a discussion as to what their opinions are.
Yeah. And it's a compliment to them, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
then you're sort of asking their opinion and give them a chance to think it through.
Yeah, and say what they think is fair and not fair. I often think that bullying is born out of, like many things, and we've discussed these things before, born out of discomfort somehow, isn't it? It's like something feels uncomfortable, there's a power difference or a need to be heard and seen in a particular way. And then as a small child or as a teenager or as an adult, we don't really know what to do with that feeling. So we chuck it over at somebody else, or we try and muscle in on something or make ourselves feel better by putting somebody else down. And it's all, it's born out of discomfort somehow.
And that's a really good point. And that's the kind of area you focus on with mindfulness, isn't it? With this sort of that we all feel discomfort at times and it's what we do about it. And, people who are bullying to an extent are not able to manage these emotions.
No.
And they're trying to find a way of dealing with them that's not healthy.
Yeah, and it can come, it can be various extremes, can't it? It can be, you can feel massive discomfort, you can be in, huge amounts of pain internally, and then that's much more maybe difficult to manage or deal with. But it could also be a little discomfort like boredom or,
Yeah, yes. And so you do something to annoy somebody and then you get a reaction and you think, actually, that's fun. I'll try again. Now, if you think your teen might have been bullied, there's the best resource I've seen, because I've been going through lots and lots of websites and books and things. I loved the Child Mind Institute report that was written by Bridget Katz, and it's got lots of different headings, and you can go into it and look for the thing that's troubling you. So is it my child that's being bullied? Is my child the bully? Is it a school setup? What do I do? And she gives so many helpful bits of advice, but all of it starts with stay calm and talk. Yeah,
perfect. Because, there's so much connected to the idea of bullying, isn't there? I mean, there's a lot of bad feeling, for parents, a lot of shame, on either side. If you have a child who you find out is bullying, that can have huge amounts of shame, or what have I done? What have I created? Created a monster kind of thing. And if your child is being bullied, then that has massive connotations. So it's maybe stopping and dealing with your own reaction first.
Your own reaction. So you need to stay calm, and then you have to start thinking, okay, so it's my child that I find out has been bullied. Now, it may not be that your child has come to you. You may suspect that there's something wrong. So the first thing is opening the conversation in a very roundabout way, just being very gentle about it, because it's very humiliating for somebody who is being bullied to have to admit it.
Yeah, it can be.
And the statistics, again, I don't know where they get these statistics, but approximately 46% of students aged 12 to 18 who were bullied during the school year notified an adult at school about the bullying. So we're saying quite a lot don't tell the people at school, and they may just be struggling on. So it's about building open communication with your teen. And then if you see something where they're going into their room and they're looking very miserable, or something's changed, it's worth saying, has anything happened?
And as you said earlier, if they do choose to share that information with you, that's actually a huge privilege. They're making themselves really vulnerable. So taking that seriously. Yeah,
taking it seriously. Has this happened before? Are you worried it will happen again? What will make you feel safer? And asking them for their opinion on, probing, can I go and talk to the teacher? Can I go and talk? Because quite often they're scared to admit, because they think it might get worse if you wade in, because a lot of parents get very cross and triggered by knowing that their child is struggling and then responding in a way that's not going to help the situation.
Yeah, and then they get fear that they'd be bullied worse because the bully finds out, etc.
Sure. Yeah. And if they're not sure whether they were being bullied, again, coming back to that definition, and the reason the definition matters is because there are lots of other things that people can do that are awful, and they require slightly different responses and different wording. Where did it happen? What was going on before it happened? Has it happened? Has it happened multiple occasions? And what do you think is the reason? Was there something you did? Is there, and not accusatory. It's about unpacking it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because we often think of bullying as, right, wrong, the bully, the victim. Can we stop it? And it's very, very black and white. Whereas actually bullying is relational. There's a relationship, and it doesn't mean that that's accepting it more or less. It's just looking at it with from a different perspective.
The one thing that they have found with bullying is that it's people who are bullies when they're younger, there's a close correlation with bad behaviour when they're older.
Yeah, which is no surprise.
Antisocial behaviour.
Yeah.
If your child was the bully, stay calm. Because very often, if we even hear some hint that our child might have done something awful, it's very upsetting, because the first thing we feel is that, like, have we parented badly? And we want to show people that we're not bad parents. So then we want to react and say, my child wouldn't do that, or how can
I amend this? Yeah.
Or then decide your child is Satan incarnate. And you're going to lock them in their room and stop them from behaving. We all have these emotional reactions, don't we? It's very easy to do.
What's gone on here? And let's not make too big a drama, but let's solve it. How can we solve it?
Yeah. So talking to your child, just say, well, I've heard. It's either the school's approached me, another parent has approached me, a child has said something. So what was going on for you? give them a chance to talk about it. Why did you feel that way? Why do you feel that it's okay to talk to that person? Did you even intend that? Because I've known quite a few kids who've said things, and at the time they thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yes.
And then the other person took offence, and actually they just, they'd be just being stupid.
Yeah.
And if that's different.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they're in a group where they feel socially really comfortable and they feel like everything's fine, they haven't really experienced that horrible feeling of feeling left out, or as most kids do at some point. If they haven't really experienced that and they feel safe in their social group, then they might not really get it. They might literally think I'm just banter.
Yeah.
And trying to explain that actually that really hurts and it feels horrible is a really good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And a bully is not a hard and fast person. No. A bully is somebody who's behaving like a bully at that time, and they could easily change.
I think that's
but it's
really
about how
important,
you manage it.
because we love to label a bully's like, oh, that's you done forever kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's so rubbish.
And those people could turn into the best allies of other people if they realise that what they're doing doesn't work. Children who bully often have other family, social or emotional issues. There can be things that are happening where, you think about back to being a teenager and how incredibly emotional that time was. And there's jealousy, there's, inadequacy. So, I remember when I was a teenager, I made friends with a girl, and the girl I made friends with said to me, I used to hate you. And I said, really? You didn't know me? And she said, well, because, I heard you had all these things and you did all this. And I just thought, gosh, she did that's extraordinary that she had all these ideas about me. And I said, where did you get that from? And other people had been saying that.
Yes. It's always about them, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was really unfortunate because then we were great friends and it was lovely. And that wasn't a bullying situation, but it's very easy for people to get the wrong impression about somebody else and feel this anger and jealousy.
And it's always based on their own story, whatever's going on in their particular life at that particular moment, and they just project it onto the other people. I mean, much earlier in their lives, I have 3 children and 2 of them are twins, and my eldest was 2 and a bit, and I know that's talking about toddlers and we're talking about teenagers, but it's also relevant. It's, that was the worst day of his life when they were born. So then it's a power struggle, and he wasn't always particularly nice to them when they were little. But that, that can continue, that reasoning can continue in later life. It's a power struggle.
And they get stuck
They
in
get
that.
stuck,
yes.
and, it was a cry for, see me, I'm important too, I'll be mean to them so that you'll listen to me.
Yes, right. And that could be part of it. It's like, if this person's bullying, let's try and unpack exactly why they're thinking and feeling this way. And it can be all sorts of things like that. A bit of a cry for attention.
Yeah, any attention is
or
better than
power.
none
But maybe they're
sometimes.
feeling powerless in other ways. Yes. And also just looking at the way we talk to our family members and our own children. Again, not wanting to lay the blame at any parents, but, we may think this is a fun way of talking in our own family and we're all comfortable with it. But it may be that another family works in a very different way and the child from that family would find it deeply offensive.
Yes, that's important.
So we have to realise that sometimes we need to be a bit more considerate about the way we treat each other in our own houses. Each person who's been involved in the bullying needs support. So because everybody's impacted. So it's also to do with the people who've witnessed the bullying. And I've noticed when I've been doing parent coaching, and I always did it in a group, and there's this fascinating dynamic where if the other people are watching a situation unfold, they will respond emotionally too.
Yes.
And they are looking to see how it pans out, because they're trying to learn too. How does this work?
Yes, that's true.
And I have this fantastic game I play with them, which I'll talk in another episode about teaching how important it is to lay down rules and continue with those rules, not sort of waver. And when I wavered with the rule deliberately, everyone who was watching either said, "Oh, I felt so much better that that poor person didn't get the consequences that you said you were going to give out," and then some other people said, wait, that's not fair. That's not. And people are spectators of the event, so they will themselves be left feeling uncomfortable, anxious about what would happen to them if they ever said anything, or they will be, think it's okay. if nothing happens.
It creates a huge ripple effect, doesn't it? And depending on where you're at and what your position is in it, that you can't not be affected by that.
It needs to be a whole school or whole environment solution. Is what I'm trying to say. Well, all these experts say, really, you can't just fix it with one thing. You've got to go into the whole school and the whole environment. Now, I hear all you parents going, yeah, if only, but my school downplays bullying. Right. Mm-hmm. So when I looked at that, there was a Psychology Today article about it, and they were saying that, usually there's a lack of awareness, because you'll say to the school, oh, this has happened. And they may well say, well, I haven't seen anything. And I had exactly that scenario when I was talking to the headmaster of a school, and we were talking about, one child picking on another child. And they took it very seriously. It wasn't any of my children, took it very seriously. And then when they were sort of going through the whole process of trying to understand what had been going on, he sent me a video that they had taken during the day of these two children having huge fun together. And he said, the problem is, this is what we see.
Yes, that's tricky,
so how do we unpick exactly what's going on when we, that's part of the problem. So it does need to be everybody engaged in saying, it's not working.
So you can get the whole story and see what's going on and how best to approach it.
And teachers really are busy.
They're really busy.
Really
they are really busy.
And you know what? You know how you feel. So I've had another scenario recently where there were two sides, sort of, he said this one, she said this one, whatever, And I was in the middle of listening to it, and I felt a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh God, and I've been like that in a court case where I've sat watching a rape trial, and the first evidence was about the man and what he did, and I just thought, oh my goodness, he's evil, he's awful. And then the defence barrister got up and started speaking and interviewing, the rape victim, and I thought, oh my goodness,
switch sides.
How could you and we as human beings feel very compromised when we're having to try and unpick what's gone on.
Which is why it's really important to see it as something that's relational.
Exactly.
Because, and get away from the right, wrong,
he said, she
good,
said, they're wrong,
bad,
they're right. Yes,
punish,
exactly.
not punish, victim, perpetrator, because that's just unhelpful. And then it's black and white, and then you're kind of limited as to how you deal with it.
Yes.
Whereas you can still point out to people that they're behaving in a way that's completely wrong and inappropriate, and make it relational. And you can also help the person who would otherwise be called the victim and report them to maybe learn how they can be in it in a relational way, and maybe learn boundaries, learn how to be in a different way in it. There's just more opportunity for growth and learning if you do it that way. So true, so true. And one of the mothers I've known who decided I'm going to remove my daughter. I don't like the way this is working. And I said to her, maybe that if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And maybe that is the right decision. Yeah. But don't forget that you need to do work with her about unpicking why this has happened. Because you may find she'll go to another school and the same thing will happen again if she's not aware of her relationship in this situation. Or at least allow her to heal what's happened. Yes, of course. It can be really traumatic. Of course. Jackie DeMarco, who's the co-author of When Your Child is Being Bullied, advises parents to be the most pleasant nuisance you possibly can until you have a resolution. And I love that. I like being a pleasant nuisance. I love that because actually, I think she's right. Rather than sort of steaming in and telling the school what they should do, or, my Johnny's not a bully, whatever. Yeah. What we need to do is write everything down. We talked about it in Girl Friendships and how it's not simply about, making sure that you can then convey to the people who are trying to sort out what's going on, what's actually happened. It is that. So dates, details, how she felt, he felt, what happened to him, her. But also it helps the person, either the perpetrator or the victim, to actually unpack it, to look at it and go, oh, so this is how I felt. This is what happened beforehand. This is my reaction. What out of that fed into that narrative? Mm-hmm. It helps them. Yeah. So then what you do, and my friend who's got 4 kids told me to do this years and years ago. She said, always notify the school. So it doesn't matter how egregious the behaviour has been. You write it down, you email them, and you say, I'd like you to act on it, or you don't have to do anything, but I need you to know that this is happening. So that then if it happens again, you now have a paper trail, or email trail is now. Yeah. And the one of the reasons this is so important is that very often the person who is being bullied
at some point will react.
You don't want that to come out of the thin air, do you?
No, because otherwise the teachers will see the person who's been bullied, punching someone, and then it will be their fault, and they'll say, well, we didn't know anything about it. So the documentation is really, really powerful. And there's a fantastic link that I've put into the podcast notes, which is a Kidscape log and school contact record, so that you can log down with your child, teenager, what's been happening, and also note down when you've contacted the school and what you said to them. And you can follow up. So then you call them the next day, say, hi, it's just me. We said we were going to do this. So how have you been getting on? You're just very polite about it, but you've got a log. So they did nothing. I love the phrase because actually, you don't have to be angry or anything. But actually, people who are angry, often I find that other people duck.
Yeah, especially in a school when they are so busy. And sometimes, these things are brought up and they're not, they've been over dramatized and so it must be difficult for places to know which ones do we need to really act on and take really seriously and which ones are going to pass. That's really hard for them to know. And yes, of course, they should act on all of them if they can, but they have limited resources.
Yes. So just, and telling the school what you would actually like rather than some kind of severe punishment is some kind of unpacking of what's been going on, because we know that the zero tolerance policy doesn't work.
No.
So if the parents of the other child can be involved and everybody else can somehow get some ownership over this, then we're likely to get a better outcome.
Yeah, with an intention to, everyone wants it to be a safe space for everybody. How can we create that in a way that has a conversation behind it? And when it gets out of alignment, gets out of balance, which it will, how do we bring it back again so that everyone's on the same page? And
just one note on cyberbullying or even cyber conversations. It's worth another episode, I think, but the thing to get across to your kids is the way that you communicate on social media and any digital platform will have a fingerprint, and you also don't know when the music will stop.
No, I love that expression. I think that's brilliant, because cyberbullying is a whole area of itself, isn't it, as you said? But
and what I mean by that, exactly. What I mean by that is that I've spoken to kids who said, oh, yeah, we talk like this, we're trading insults, and they're using this offensive language to each other. And you don't know when they're going to screenshot your conversation and then show it to somebody.
No.
And at that point, you're the person who looks like the really terrible person. It was in spite of the fact that you may have had some Snapchat conversation going on for a month.
Yeah, I love that. You don't know when the music's going to stop.
You don't know when it's going to stop. So I constantly, whenever I talk to my kids, I say, oh, look at the social media. I try to be as polite and nice as I possibly can, because just think about yourself standing in the middle of a square. Would you really say some of these things to people?
Don't write it. Just don't write it.
Yeah. So just we need to model it, and we need to be explicit with our kids about what's healthy and
be a pleasant nuisance.
I'm
so going to be that.
I just show that when you call out the school, hi, it's me again.
I'm going to do it at
home. Hi, it's mum again. How's the room? Have you dealt with bullying in any way? How did you find out about it? What did you do about it? And did you find anything in particular worked for you? We'd love to know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and help@teenagersuntangled.com. And if you need any more help with mindfulness techniques, this sort of stuff we've been talking about in terms of just drilling down into those uncomfortable feelings and unpacking them, Susie's always available for online consultations as well as in person. Now, April says, I'm so tired of getting attitude and backchat from my daughter. I'm doing things for her, but she's rude back. She doesn't seem to treat anyone else in this way. And another listener, Sarah, says, my teenage son often backchats when he thinks he's right, but then accuses me of not listening to him. Susie, have you had a resurgence of the terrible twos, where they think they're independent and they're frustrated because they don't have the language to express their very complex emotions, and they just sort of stamp their feet and say, that's not fair, you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, regularly. But I kind of also struggle a little bit with the wording. I actually had to Google backchat, which
it's used a lot.
It's used a lot. So what does it actually mean? And it's when somebody's rude to someone in authority. I think that's the definition I read. And I struggle with it in that we're trying to bring up our children to, go out in the world and to have an opinion and to go and do all the things they want to do and be themselves, be who they are. And then we try and curb them at home and say, well, you can't talk to me like that, and you can't talk to me like that, and you can't say that, and you can't. It doesn't sort of sit massively in alignment with me. And I think where I am with it is that I've always said to my kids that I have no problem. I sort of welcome if they're angry, if they have if they feel angry, if there's something they disagree with me, they're always, always welcome to express that. And there is ways of saying it that I don't like. And I don't know whether that counts as backchat, but I don't really have a problem with that. I do have a problem, and I've made it very clear there are some things I don't like the way they say it, but the actual, talking back or having a different opinion is welcome. I think there's a difference.
Yeah, I think one of the big problems with the whole backchat is when we are more authoritative parents. Our style is that style. So my husband is quite that style. Yeah. And he feels, I'm paying the bills.
Yes.
I'm the big man in the house. It's my house. And he thinks like that. It's my house.
Yes.
And that, yes, that's true. But your child has no choice about where they live. And they will try and flex their muscles. And I think that I personally, if somebody tells me I'm doing something wrong, I do instantly bristle.
Yeah.
So I do wonder about, it's just the way in which we just have, I mean, my older daughter said, have you seen the way they talk to each other? I mean, they're constantly at each other.
Right.
And I think it's very much to do with the way he opens his conversation with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on, the kids' personalities. Mine all react very differently, and what's going on in their lives. Like my eldest he's got exams at the moment, and he's had a sort of a funny run up to it, shall we say?
Funny or not?
Yeah, not so funny actually. He's had a run up to it. And so he was feeling a bit, at the weekend, and at dinner I asked him something about something he was doing with his work, and he snapped at me, and it was a bit weird. And I've learnt, it took me a long time to get there, don't unpick that in the moment, just wait. And so I went to him after dinner and said, what's going on? What's up? And he actually just went, because we've had these conversations before, I'm sorry, I'm just really grumpy because I'm really fed up of revising. Okay, done, finished. But we have to just sort of, understand the context and maybe take things less personally, and also have our personal boundaries. So what I would accept in my home and from my children might not be acceptable at all in another house. And there's no judgment in that. We have our own limits and our own personal boundaries. And as long as we can express them and live by them, then there's no sort of universal backchat, I don't think.
And I loved your point about having a conversation with them about where the rules, where the lines are drawn.
Yeah.
This is absolutely critical, because I think a lot of parents get very confused about this, because they feel they either kind of think that putting too many boundaries in is, stultifying their growth, or it's the opposite, that they need proper boundaries. Yes. It's really important. And I think what's really interesting is that we have this prefrontal cortex in teenagers that simply isn't that well developed yet. And that's the thing that is the ability to control your impulses. And while teenagers' brains are rewiring, what you want to do is you want to have consistent behavior that you'd like them to exhibit when they're older, because what's happening is they're laying down pathways to a certain way of responding. And so the more they do the snappy response, the funny, switty or angry response, the more that's going to be a groove that gets dug. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to teach them to okay, so this is how you're going to do it. And I'm talking to you about this because actually you're laying down habits for the rest of your life, and it really matters.
Oh, I love that. I love that way of explaining it, and that's something they can really relate to as well. I think that's brilliant.
And so you were talking about sort of laying down rules. This is absolutely critical. So the research that I was doing says, you make house rules, make it very, very clear that this is the sort of language we accept. So if you're going to disagree with me, we don't use abusive language. We don't shout. As soon as you shout, I always say to my kids, the second someone's shouting, no one's listening. All that's happened is your chimp has come out and it's having a bit of a tantrum, and people will either duck or leave. They just, or they'll shout back. They throw stuff back. Yeah. So we don't want to get to that bit. So if you feel an emotional response coming on, the answer is, and this is for parent as well as teenagers, we need to take a breath.
Yeah.
And I think we're in a world where we just feel like we've got to respond immediately.
Yes.
And I think particularly teenage, do you remember I would spend so much time being really cross because somebody would have said something to me and I thought, and then 10 minutes later I had this fantastic comeback.
I still have that.
It's so frustrating. And the teenagers are full of that. Now I just say, oh, well, I am who I am, whatever.
Oh, you're more mature than I am.
But actually, it's a thing for teenagers. Yeah. So they may be flexing that. They may be thinking, I've got to come up with something. And so actually saying to them, it's okay to take some time. So you don't agree with me, that's okay, but don't start swearing at me and shouting at me. So you need to stop and think, okay, how do I explain this in a way that will have the impact I want? So what do I want out of this?
Yeah.
Right? I know it's a big leap.
It is
a teenager.
You can teach them how that feels as well from mindfulness perspective. Well, how does it feel when you are, raging, or just before you're raging would be ideal. Preferable. But it's really hard. And also, as parents and as teenagers, we will, of course, flip over into the ragey bit and the bit that's not good. Of course, we do that with humans. And then mending that afterwards and showing them how to mend it as well. It's really important.
And the showing them how to mend it is part of teaching them how to run relationships as an adult. So even though I think a lot of parents think, oh, if I actually apologise or I tell them I've done something wrong or that wasn't quite the right way to respond, I lose their respect. It's the opposite. If you come in and say, actually, I didn't mean to be like that. We're all human.
And it teaches them that they can also mess up and apologise and we can all be good again.
Yes. It's not intrinsic. It's something that just happens. And when your child talks back to you and they refuse to do something you ask them to do, for example, wait till you're a little bit calm and then restate the expectation and what the consequences are. Best thing to do is have a family meeting or a one-on-one with them where you agree that these are certain expectations. And then when they don't live up to them, you say, okay, so you've said this, so now I'm going to do this. So you've said you won't clear away the dishes, so I won't be cooking supper tomorrow. So good luck with that. Whatever is your agreement on what you think is a reasonable consequence for unpleasant behaviour.
Yeah. And you can have specifics, can't you? I mean, I remember having a conversation there'd been a disagreement, massive disagreement, and having that conversation with my eldest and saying, I have absolutely no problem with you disagreeing with me, being angry with any of the stuff of the content. I have no problem with that. I welcome it. I want to know what you think. And I do have a problem with you speaking like this and being, specific with this, and this, and that is unacceptable. Do you hear me? Kind of thing. And he's like, yeah, okay.
And that's it, because actually then they do have respect for you because you also say, I promise not to do that to you either. That's the problem. It needs to be both ways. You can't say you can't speak to me like that and yet you speak to them that way, because the problem with that is all you're doing is you're kind of bullying them because they can't get away from it. You're making their life hell and they don't have any means of, expressing themselves.
Yeah, and at the very best, you're sort of being a hypocrite.
And making it clear to the teenager that that you're willing to listen and have an open mind, but the consequences stay. So, you say, so these were the consequences, this is what's going to happen, and just stick to your guns. You don't have to suddenly backtrack on something because they put together a better argument. I mean, you could, but you need to be thinking, if I'm going to threaten something, threaten's not the right word, if I'm going to explain to them that you do this, then this is going to happen, it needs to be something you can enforce.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think that's brilliant. And sometimes there can also be flexibility in that. I remember once with my eldest, it's always him, isn't it? Interesting. There was something I wanted, he needed to do, and we disagreed with that and really disagreed with it. And then I found out that there was a valid reason as to why that didn't work for him. And then eventually he explained what that was. And I was like, oh, well, of course. Well, let's do it this way then, or at this time, or at this place, or whatever. I can't remember exactly how the details, and then he was like, oh, okay, great. And it was solved. So there can be also flexibility in it.
And that's a perfect
conversation.
It's a perfect illustration of why, whether it's talking about sex, about these sorts of rules, is you don't just have that conversation once.
No.
It's not done. And so you have to be prepared to come back when you sort of go, ooh, we've got crunchy gear changes here, then just say, hey, should we have a chat about this? Because we're not quite working well here.
And showing them that there's flexibility, showing them that if they come with a reason and you're listening and that you're able to make a compromise or just be flexible is great for them, because they need that in life. We all need that.
And they're learning the skills. Every time that happens, they learn how to solve conflicts. They'll be able to use them in their own relationships. They'll be able to use them in the workplace. All this stuff really matters. Being prepared to come back and say, I don't think this is working. I disagree with this. You know, it's very important practice at home.
Because there's nothing worse than a rule being enforced. I mean, we all know that ourselves, being enforced just for the sake of it. And you know it's not really working. You know it's just for the sake of it. And everyone's left going, what on earth? It's rubbish.
Absolutely, absolutely. If your child seems to be absolutely out of control and they are constantly defiant and you're not able to get through to them, then that's something rather different. Right? Because we're talking about children who, when you have those conversations, they respond. They feel understood and listened to, and then there's a better relationship. If it's non-stop, that's the point. And you've made these changes and you've thought about the way you're working with them, and it's now become entrenched. That's the time to be seeking some extra help outside. So that's really family therapy or something where you can all turn up. Or just therapy for them, but you know, we do have to be able to flag up. There are certain situations where there may be other problems that are not being
There's some other
understood
there somewhere.
Yeah. Right, well, that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Audible, review us, tell your friends. And next week, we'll take a look at that sticky subject, pornography, and how we discuss it with our teenagers. And we've had a lot of parents saying they're not sure what fun things to do with their teens when they do have time. So let's have a look at some great ideas. Please feel free to tell us yours, because let's face it, we're struggling too.
Yes, please. Any ideas?
Email, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you want to do to reach us. So that's it for now.
Bye for now.